It's been 20 years since the class of 2006 walked across the stage here at Davidson, and back then the playbook for the playbook for college athletics was relatively simple. Today, that playbook hasn't just been revised, it's been completely rewritten. We find ourselves in an era of unprecedented transition where the tradition of the student athlete meets the high stakes reality of NIL, the transfer portal, and a rapidly shifting legal landscape. To help us navigate this chaotic new world, we're joined by our four classmates who see this evolution from every single possible angle. From the front office and the sidelines to the media booth and the grassroots level. Please join me in welcoming, again, Chris Clooney, Matt McPhillip, Tyler Thompson Tapia, and Brendan Winters, all amazing graduates of the class of 2006, and we dive into the new reality of this game we love. Chris Clooney, class of '06, also Davidson's Vice President and Director of Athletics, is going to serve as the moderator for today's panel, and I now turn the program over to him.
Great. Thanks so much, Judith. And thank you all for being here. We're excited to spend some time with you all and chat about the chaotic nature of NCAA athletics. So as Judith said, my name is Chris Clooney, Vice President, Director of Athletics here at Davidson College. I was a political science major, Spanish minor here at Davidson, played on the men's basketball team as part of the honor council, other various things. Before I came back to Davidson as AD in 2018, I worked 10 years for the NBA in international basketball operations. And I live in Davidson with my family, my wife, Lauren, and two girls, Maisie and Sienna. I will now pass it over to Brendan.
Thanks, Chris. I was also on the basketball team with Chris and Matt. Matt was my roommate for a few years. Fun fact. After Davidson, I went overseas. I played 5 years in France, Germany, Hungary, and Greece. During that time, I started up an organization with another teammate of mine, Logan Kosmalski, called Pro Skills Basketball. It was just a summer camp, but once we were done playing, we decided to do it full time, and that morphed into essentially what we call an AAU organization, AAU teams for kids kind of second, third grade, all the way through 11th grade. We're in about 25 cities today, and I've been doing that for the last 15 years or so. Back to Davidson, I was an English major and didn't do a whole lot except for basketball in school. And towards the end, I was part of the Young Entrepreneurs Organization and did the Investing Club as well. So that's it for me. I'll throw it to Tyler or Matt.
Yeah, I'll go. I'm Tyler Thompson Tapia. I'm the only member of this panel that wasn't on the basketball team, although I would argue that is their loss. I was an English major at Davidson along with Brendan. I think we were in a writing nonfiction prose class together senior year, so it's good to see you again. After Davidson, I moved to Nashville in 2006 and just got a normal 9 to 5 in the publishing business. I was a copy editor for an entertainment company. And on the side, anyone who knew me then or who knows me now knows I'm a huge Kentucky basketball fan. So on the side, I started freelancing for a Kentucky basketball website. And in 2012, they brought me on full time. It's Kentucky Sports Radio. At the time, it was one of the most popular blogs and fan sites when those were kind of just coming up in the media world. And in 2018, I took over as editor-in-chief, and now I run a staff of 7 people. We are proud to be with the On3 network, and I cover Kentucky basketball, Kentucky football, recruiting, you name it. Been covered several Final Fours at this point, and obviously Chris and Matt, I've kept up with your careers, and Brendan, it's really great to see you and see you're still in the industry, and I'm honored to be on this panel. And I'll pass it to Matt.
I too am honored to be on this panel, and it's great to be with some of my former classmates and talking to all of you who are excited and interested to learn about this interesting world that we have found ourselves in college athletics. I am a class of 2006 alum. I did live with Brendan. Chris Clooney crashed at my house when he interviewed for the job he currently has. After graduating, I had like 2 to 3 months of attempting to play professional basketball overseas before returning, and then working for the Charlotte Bobcats. That was their name before going back to being the Hornets. working at Emory University for Davidson alum Jason Zimmerman, class of '94, and then being back at Davidson as an assistant and associate head coach for 14 years, and having just completed my 4th year as head coach. And my 4 years kind of run right through uh, the many changes that we've seen, and thankfully have had Chris Clooney leading us through this. But I was a history major at Davidson. My wife, Kelsey, also a history major at Davidson, was class of 2008, and we live just through these trees outside my office with our 3 children.
Great. Thank you all. So, Matt, let me stick with you as we jump right into it. But when we graduated in 2006, the NCAA model was sort of stable, right? And what it looks like today is nothing like what it looked like back then. And it's unrecognizable in a lot of aspects. And it's really around a few key instances that we'll get into. Number one, the transfer portal, the ability to transfer as many times as you want as long as you're eligible. Number two, name, image, and likeness, which is the ability for athletes to generate compensation, which leads to number three, litigation, and just the chaotic nature of the legal landscape, the House settlement. There's a settlement that provides back pay almost $3 billion to athletes from 2015 to 2024. There are roster limits now, and there's now the ability to share revenue directly from institutions to players, sort of building upon the name, image, and likeness. And so it looks nothing like it did before. And so, Matt, my question for you is, how has this new landscape changed your approach to recruiting, roster retention? And can you speak about the ability to make money and to transfer, and the restrictions, how that has forced you to change the way that you run the program?
Yeah, it's very, very different in so many ways, as everybody's probably very aware. But you think about it, when Chris, Brendan, when you were recruited, I was recruited very differently. But when we were recruited to Davidson, what the coaches would do is they would try to learn about players at a very young age, build that relationship with them, build it with their family, help them believe in the mission of your program, and for us, helping them believe in Davidson and convincing them that it could be the greatest place for them to spend their 4 years of college. And now, not many people stay at the same school for 4 years, and some may only stay there for 1. So that early recruiting is a thing of the past. From an NIL revenue share standpoint, the market changes every single year. And each year we are seeing more and more and more money being offered to the players. And because there's money out there, every player, I think, has an agent. Most of them do, if not all of them. There are walk-ons that have agents. So non-scholarship players even have agents. And I would say the challenge for those of us that are on this panel, and many who are on this call, is that we all have such a belief in Davidson College and how being a student and being an athlete here can really shape our future, their future. But now that is secondary to so many because there's so much opportunity to make a lot of money. We would typically bring in a recruiting class 3 or 4 athletes. Last year and now again this year, we're going to bring in 7. And of those 7, 4 of them are transfers. And what's really interesting is that we've signed 7, or are in the process of signing or completing the actual ink on the paper, 7 of them. None of those players were recruited until March of this year. Typically, we're signing players throughout the fall and in November, but 7 of them we didn't even communicate with until March. So the conversations are minimal compared to what it used to be. You're not talking to athletes, to prospects, to their parents for years. We actually have a player who's going to arrive in 3 weeks here. My first call with him was on a Sunday. We had 2 Zoom calls with him and his family on Tuesday, and he committed to us on Wednesday. And he would have committed to us on Tuesday night had we had all of the academic stuff in order in terms of the admissions having a chance to read his transcripts from high school and from college, and then our registrar's office determining that he had whatever number of credits that could transfer into Davidson. Now, he visited after he chose Davidson, and that is what is happening more and more right now. And I think about Brendan and I. Brendan and I competed against each other in our. We both went to prep school, so our 5th year of high school. But our senior year of high school, Brendan was at Worcester Academy. I was at the Hunt School in Princeton, New Jersey, and we played a game against each other, and we chatted afterwards about what it was going to be like playing at Davidson the next year. now at that point, none of these players even knew that they were going to be going to Davidson, or haven't even spoken to the coaching staff. But as I mentioned, kids are now visiting after they make the decision to come to Davidson. But what we're also seeing is now people are arriving here and they're visiting, and they are seeing that Davidson is even greater and better than they ever imagined or expected. And we have a rising sophomore on our team from Spain named Ian Plateo. He committed to us in early May of last year. He visited with his parents in June before actually showing up to train with our team. And Ian's parents, before leaving, made a comment that they were thankful they did not bring Ian's brother with him, because his brother was going to be really upset that he could not also attend Davidson. So you're going through a very different recruiting process. But all that being said, we are even more vigilant than ever about concerns, red flags, and being certain as best as possible that we are bringing in players that value all that we offer and all that makes us special. And then when they get here, reinforcing those values daily, to know that even in this crazy landscape, they're part of something much bigger than themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. And Tyler, I'm going to come to you next. But one thing that I've said before is it's really crazy because when Coach Bob McKillop was here, season ended, he did three things. He recruited freshmen, then he looked at maybe looking at transfers, and then maybe he had to re-recruit somebody from leaving Davidson. And you now, as the head coach, have to do those same three things in reverse. The first thing you're looking at is re-recruiting the current team. The second thing you're doing is looking at transfers, and the third thing you're doing is looking at freshmen, right? And it's just completely flipped on its head in terms of where the landscape is, and like you said, the traditional ways of the past. And that's definitely sort of the perspective here. Tyler, you cover a different fan base, right? One that we compete against, but that has big time FBS football, right? The University of Kentucky is a blue blood. And so can you talk a little bit about how the transfer portal NIL has shifted the way fans and donors engage with the team, even the media? Is it still about school spirit, or is it becoming more transactional just in your world?
I think it can still be both. I think Kentucky fans are still going to be Kentucky fans. I think the money that's coming into it now brings a certain level of accountability. So, for example, Kentucky basketball last offseason spent $22 million on its roster. That number was leaked out, but the staff did nothing to shoot that number down. So it kind of followed Kentucky all year like a target. So the staff put it out there knowing that it was a gamble. They wanted other schools to see, we'll spend this much on a roster. They wanted players to see that. And when the team didn't live up to expectations, it kind of backfired. Kentucky didn't do that great last season. So other schools are using it against them now in recruiting, saying you spent all this money on a roster and it didn't play out. And now this offseason, we're seeing teams spend even more than that. We're seeing teams that are spending $30 million to build a team, whether it's transfer portal, retainment, etc. And so, for example, I just pulled some numbers. This is at the Power 4 level, so a little different, but everything's scalable. So right now, a top point guard and a wing in the transfer portal is going for $2.5 to $4 million. Bigs are going up to $5 million. Now, if you have that kind of money, it's great, but it also raises the expectations to perform. And if you're giving money, if you're one of those donors, that's doubly true. You're like, I gave this much money to support the team, and this is what they did. So I think early on in the NIL era, it felt as though we went through a phase where there was a ton of pressure on fans to donate that money, whether it be through a collective. It feels like that's kind of gone away right now. I don't know if you all noticed that as much. Now that we have the House settlement with revenue sharing, that brings in some money from the university to help. And if fans want to donate to their program, let me be clear, they definitely should. But I don't feel like they should ever feel obligated to. That should be the roles of the schools, sponsors and big time donors. So I think that there is still a world where it's both, but it's definitely changing by the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. And that just shows sort of two different worlds, correct? Because, we're also a unique institution. We're a small liberal arts school, right? And high academic institution competing at the Division I level. And we have sort of created a model whereby, revenue sharing, but through philanthropic giving, right? Some of these schools, Kentucky's in the SEC, they're getting upwards of 60, 70, 75 million a year, right? Through football and contracts to then share revenue. And other schools are having to figure out other ways. So there's different models of doing it. But I do think one thing that is important is what you mentioned, Tyler, just the accountability, right? There's just a lot of pressure now that are on coaches, that are on staffs, that are on players. Players are feeling pressure as well, and it gets out in the media, and it kind of changes the perspective, and it speaks to how a lot of this is about the short term. So much of the focus is on the short term and what folks can get now. And we are and have been built and continue to try to be built upon the long term, right? It's like, hey, the experience at Davidson is going to benefit you, has benefited all of us, right? And we're still selling that and embracing the future at the same time, if it makes sense. Brendan, I want to shift to you. You see athletes long before they reach, college. How is the professionalization of college sports trickling down to youth basketball, to AAU, to grassroots basketball? And our 14-year-olds already thinking about their brand, already thinking about NIL, which we also know is in high school as well.
Yeah, on the elite level, they certainly are. From 2020 to 2024, I believe it was, we actually partnered with Steph and ran Team Curry on the Under Armour circuit for him, which is essentially, hey, go out and get the best players you can, put the best teams together, compete on this circuit, and try to win championships. So at that time, we were recruiting elite level players. And that was a little bit before all the NIL stuff. It was kind of the 1, 2, 3 years before. But even then, there were certain expectations with those players. You have to pay for everything. You have to pay for their parents to come. It was incredibly expensive. It was so expensive that we kind of had to, and in partnership with Steph, step back and say, hey, like this doesn't make sense to do anymore because it was so expensive. And now it's even worse because now once the floodgates opened in college with the NIL and athletes getting paid and the crazy amount of money, now the expectations are greater. So these elite level players not only expect to have all expenses paid for, they also, a lot of them, especially the top players, expect to also be paid, which some of these circuits are paying players to come play on their circuit. And so we certainly see it from the players, but the parents as well. The parents have greater expectations. We have my organization has made the decision to back out of that. So we no longer typically have Division I players because of that. We focus on mostly Division III level players and helping those kids because they come with lower expectations, which we appreciate. And I think just a healthier relationship. But yes, we certainly see it on the youth level, and the AAU scene is very wild. And now with kind of the almost no rules at the college level, it's like the no rules from AAU has trickled up into college where it's like, hey, grass is always greener. Where can I go? Who's promising what? I'll leave. I don't care, and just do whatever you want sort of deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And you answered the next question I was going to ask you is effectively, what is Pro Skills doing in this space, right? You sort of said, hey, we're pulling back. But in that, like at the high school level, I'm interested to see, like, do you see the impact of NIL? I mean, kids are now going to different states that have more permissible NIL laws. Kids are changing high schools rapidly. Like, I mean, are you seeing that even as you're building relationships and competing against other programs and high school kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone hears about these kind of basketball factories opening up, these basketball prep schools. I mean, those are becoming more prevalent. Kids are leaving the public schools or the local private schools and going to the IMGs, and there's a lot more of those type of schools opening up. So that is certainly happening a lot. And I think the other big piece that's happening right now that Matt, you and Chris have to deal with, especially is now you have these AAU directors or AAU coaches, these elite level ones that have been doing it for 3, 4, 5, 10 years. They are becoming agents for these players. Matt mentioned agents before. Everyone has an agent. Agents in quotes. These aren't like mostly not NBA agents where they have to get certified, they have to take a test, they have to be qualified. A lot of them are just AAU coaches or AAU directors that have the relationships with the kids, have the relationships with the college, and then all they do is just create bidding wars against each other and just say, hey, I have a player. They call up 10 schools. What would you pay for him? What would you pay for him? What would you pay for, or what would you pay for her? And then it's like they just go to the highest bidder, and then these agents get 20% sometimes, which is an absolute crazy number. And I know a bunch of these guys that are doing it now, and there's no way they're qualified to be agents, but it's just they have the relationships and there's no rules. So they're just doing what they can do.
Yeah, and it's we'll get into kind of the front office model a little bit later, but um, it's interesting because it's the professionalization of sports without the pro sort of constraints, right? And so Tyler, to kind of kick it back to you, um, is this temporary, or is this sort of the permanent new sort of architecture of college athletics from your perspective? Um, it's likely not sustainable, but what's going to happen? Like, is football going to break off, or football and basketball going to break off? There's a lot of talk this past week about the SCORE Act and Congress and federal legislation, and didn't get to a vote on the Senate, but they're kind of reworking things. Like, what do you see from your side in the direction that we're heading in?
Yeah, it definitely still feels temporary and it's not sustainable at all. Like you mentioned, the SCORE Act was set to go on the House floor. I think next week it got pulled because there wasn't enough support for it. There's another bipartisan bill that's going to be announced later this week that seems to have more support. So fingers crossed. I think until there are federal guidelines put in place, it's just going to continue to roll. The House settlement, went into effect last July. I think there was hope there that it would level the playing field, that each school could, use up to $20.3 million or $20.5 million of its own money and disperse it between the sports. But that hasn't worked. The big teams are just continuing to pad above that cap with money through NIL, through multimedia rights partners, et cetera. So the big dogs are going to continue to eat. They're going to continue to money hunt. And I hate what that is going to do to the non-revenue sports. I'm really worried about that. You mentioned college football and college basketball potentially breaking off. I think that that's kind of already happening, with college football, with the college football playoff, that's kind of happened. And I think you may see it more, maybe not specific by sport, but specific by conference. The SEC and the Big Ten have so much money and so much power right now that there's a lot of talk at all of these league meetings that they may just branch off and do their own thing. And what's that going to do to the college landscape? It's going to be really interesting. I'm sure you guys have probably talked about, a lot of these issues at the A10 meetings, so be interested to hear perspectives on that. But yeah, relying on the NCAA to govern any of this has proven to be, you just can't. They're a little bit toothless when it comes to this stuff. And at this point, it just feels like the guys who have the most money are just going to continue to have the most money.
Yeah. Yeah. Tyler or Matt, I'm going to come back to you in a sec, but Tyler, you mentioned something and keep adding questions to Q&A. You spoke to this one, so I want to get to it right now. Thad asked if UK spent 22 million on basketball and the rev share number is capped at 20.5, how are they funding football and other non-rev sports? Can you speak to, you mentioned multimedia, but traditional third party, can you speak to how it's feasible that sports can even, or teams can even do that and go above and beyond the cap in the way that they are?
Right. So Kentucky didn't spend all of its cap on men's basketball. It probably spent maybe 10 million of that 20.5 million. However, UK and a lot of the big Power Forward conference teams, they have multimedia rights partners. In UK's case, it's JMI, that their job is basically they go out and they find third-party NIL deals for their players. And that's how they add above the cap. And that's a luxury that you have if you're one of those big programs, but other programs that don't have those multimedia rights deals, it is a disadvantage. But you can still add above the cap through third-party NIL deals. However, they have to be approved through the CSC, which that was another thing that was introduced with the House settlement. It was a hopes of, this has to be a valid NIL deal. You have to either sign autographs or do a photo shoot or do a signing or whatever to prove that you earn this money. It's not just a really wealthy donor opening up a checkbook and writing $2 million for something. There has to be a reason for it. But there is a lot of debate over whether some of those third-party MMR deals, multimedia rights deals, are valid. So it's going to be an issue that continues to happen.
Yeah, so you can picture Kentucky spending, make it up, 7 million on basketball, 7 million on football, 6 million on everything else, but then that 7 million for basketball is enhanced by third-party NIL deals, right? To get to over
Right.
20 million. Same for football, right? So that's how you're going above and beyond the cap in those instances. So
Correct.
Matt, can you speak to the shift to operate in a more professional manner with teams in regards to having like front offices, scouting, negotiating with agents, performance? The fact that we now have a GM and two assistant GMs, right? Like it's just completely changed the model moving forward.
Yeah, our assistant GMs are essential. Matt Berman and Stephen Curry are. They don't have an office here, but they might as well have an office here. But no, we have a GM, Chris. Obviously, you and I are very aware of that. But his name is Austin Bunce. He's superb. And what's interesting about Austin is that he's different than what you would think about, like the professional role of general manager. Austin learned Davidson from the inside out. He started here working in development and athletic fundraising, but he had a background in basketball. He was a manager at Penn State for the basketball program. He worked at Under Armour, and his father-in-law also is a college coach, or recently retired, very successful college coach. So he knows the game from different angles, but he also knows Davidson from different angles. So he has great relationships with people on our campus, with our fans, with our donors, but also with people all across college basketball. So in his role, obviously, he gets to know our players and their families very well. And in many ways, he runs our recruiting process. He has to speak with agents constantly to be positioned for players we could ultimately start recruiting. But also, as crazy as it sounds, which we've somewhat alluded to, having an awareness of what our current players are thinking to position ourselves to hopefully keep them and retain them. But his job is absolutely necessary, and having a GM like Austin, who is perfect for Davidson, is essential. I guess what you can also say about like the professionalization of this is that players, understandably, are treating it as such. They are treating this like professional opportunities, and they are making decisions about how to maximize their basketball development, but also to maximize their earnings and future earnings. And it's how the decisions are made. You know, many of these guys feel that the best way to develop on the basketball court is to get a lot of playing time. So some may leave because they aren't getting as much playing time as they wish, or whether they believe they should be receiving more, or they want to go somewhere where they know they can find that playing time, find that role. With that, they're no longer being that penalty of having to sit out. Some guys have chosen to come to Davidson because they've had the opportunity to earn playing time at a younger age. You think about where we sit. We do not have graduate school at Davidson, and there are so many grad transfers out there, especially when there was that fifth year, that COVID year. Our lack of graduate school allowed us to get some very talented young players in recent years because they saw an opportunity to not have to compete with a 23 or 24 or 25-year-old to play an impactful role that they would have to at other institutions. So it's helped us in some ways, but those players are still young, and we are still having to compete against those 23, 24-year-olds. But a good example in terms of retaining players, the professionalization of what this all is we had a player this year who had a good season for us, and we learned through his agents that he was being offered a lot of money if he were to decide to transfer. But those opportunities were at schools that maybe they were offering a lot of money, but knowing him, they weren't like the final destination. They weren't the dream schools for him. So the conversation he and I had were, hey, if you come back, you can have an incredible year like we believe you can, and you're going to work to do. And the next year we could sit in this office and we can have that exact same conversation. And you could either give me a hug and say, thanks, I've got a chance to go make $2 million at the big state school where I came from. Or you could tell me you're going to stay at Davidson, and a year from now, you're going to be positioned to go be an NBA draft pick. But those are the conversations we're having in terms of professionalization and the decision-making on it. That player, I think he really appreciated that conversation. He left anyways because his agents demanded more money. But role and then development to become a pro and to sign that next contract is such a huge part of the day-to-day life of college basketball and college athletics.
Yeah, absolutely. The priorities have shifted. And I think, and we'll get to a little bit of this a little bit later. What's tough for a school like Davidson is how to embrace the chaotic space that we're in while not sacrificing our core values, right? Because we still need kids to get up and go to 8:30 class, although Brennan Winters probably never took an 8:30 class. Like, we still need kids to sign honor statements, right? Every Friday. Like, we still need kids to abide by the honor. Like, we are still promoting a model that complements, right? And doesn't take a back seat to this new athletic model, if you will. And that's the tightrope that we have to walk, which looks vastly different, Tyler, at a space like Kentucky that for years has sort of operated in a different space, but sort of like now it's sort of like nothing's hidden, everything's kind of come to the surface, right? That's how they've always operated, and now it's just sort of plain for everybody to see. The question I have for you, and you mentioned federal legislation, like where are you on the employment piece? Like, do you think college athletes should become employees to allow them to collectively bargain? Because collective bargaining might actually provide some structure that we look for in a space where there is no structure, right? Like, the market is just through the roof because there is no salary cap. Maybe having them be employees allows us to have some structure, but also like there could be a break. Maybe it's football and basketball, the revenue generating sports that are in one space, and other non-revenue sports are in a different space, other Olympic sports. Like, where are you, and where do you see that potentially moving?
I kind of see both sides. I think it kind of feels like employment, status collective bargaining is kind of where ultimately this is all headed with all of this money. And I know that a lot of athletic directors, especially at the Power Four level, they want that to happen because this is getting so out of control. So if that does happen, employees, student athletes would become employees, they would get benefits, they get health care and all that stuff. But with that comes a whole other set of regulations, and it's not cheap. So I really worry what that would do to schools who are not at the high major level. It'll be interesting to see. I know that the SCORE Act, that kind of avoided the whole employment status. It'll be interesting to see with this new bipartisan bill, if there is anything about like included about that, or do they keep the language in that bill a little bit vague as to kind of figure it out down the road, just kind of kicking the can down the road. I think what we have seen was they had hoped to put some kind of guardrails on all of this with the House settlement, and that did not work. Schools are easily adding way more over that. So it's just been a year since that happened. So we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. The tough part is we sort of agree to a settlement and thinking there's going to be a framework for people to work within, an actual cap, right? A hard cap that people have to abide by, roster limits. Like we agreed to all of that, back pay for athletes, right? And nothing is sort of being held to accountable, right? And what we're seeing is the NCAA, they have rules that they're trying to abide by, they're trying to uphold, and state laws are superseding those rules, right? So that's leading to the chaos, right? And so that's why we were just joking before we got on the call, right? And like Will Wade just signed an NBA draft pick who spent, where did RJ play? I think he played at Louis.
Played at UMass, actually.
Yeah, played at UMass
before going to St. John's. Sorry,
he played
before going to St. John's. Yeah. And then played professionally, and now potentially we'll see what happens. See what the courts say. I'm going to come back and play at LSU, which I think somebody asked a question about that. Yeah.
Yeah, his fate is going to be in the hands of a judge in Louisiana, and I think we all know how that's going to go. We got a couple more examples of that last year. Charles Bediako, who played at Alabama and then went pro and then came back through the courts, was able to play a little bit for Alabama. So you've got a lot of G League players, a lot of former pros now doing that. And whether or not it happens, the NCAA has shown they have no governance over it.
Yeah, absolutely. Brendan, I've got a question for you. So you played professionally overseas for 5 years. What we're seeing now, and Davidson was really great about this, and Coach Bob McKillop started it, and Matt has continued it. Coach Gail Folks on the women's side and James Jansen, they do a great job on the international space. But like Davidson for a long time has had a ton of success recruiting internationally, right? But those were always sort of tough situations, right? Like folks didn't necessarily want to come over and come to college and play and get an education. And now it's sort of the flip side, right? Because you can almost make more money depending on where you're coming over as an international player than you can staying and playing pro, in a given country. But just think about sort of, your time playing professionally, and what that would have done to sort of your experience, right? Like think about the young kids that you played against and saw come up through clubs that now are choosing at age 19 and 20 to come over and play. It would have completely changed sort of your experience, and shifted priorities for certain players depending on what was available to come overseas.
Yeah, I think it totally flips it both ways. One of the appeals for Davidson for me was A, the academics, but then B, Coach Bob McKillop and Davidson had developed this really nice pipeline to playing professionally overseas, a nice pathway. And of course, my goal was the NBA, and I got close, but wasn't quite good enough. And so I was forced to go overseas. But the problem I would have had if I was getting offered $1 million to go play, or $1.5 million, or so, that would just totally have ruined my overseas experience, because those salaries overseas are nowhere close to that for these guys that are, and girls here that are, 500,000, a million. They're not anywhere near there. And then conversely, overseas, the players that are really good young up and comers over there, they're getting offered a lot more money to play here in college, which is probably a good thing for college basketball to get more skilled players coming over. But I think it's really hurting the overseas game, because Americans are coming over there with just totally a crazy mindset, of like what they might make and what it's going to be, and then it's taking the young players from there and bringing them overseas, and so they're no longer developing and being part of the clubs over there. So it's definitely disrupting that whole ecosystem over there, and I'm not sure how how anyone's handling it at this point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So a couple of my questions are bleeding into the Q&A, so I'll weave them in. But Matt, I'm going to come back to you. So talk to us about how you re-recruit and recruit kids, knowing that Davidson does not have the resources that other schools have. So like, what are you focused on, right? Like, what are you selling? How are you selling Davidson? What does that pitch look like? Somebody asked, what are the strategies? Eric asked, what are the strategies that Davidson employs to re-recruit students? So Rick Barnes asked, would it benefit Davidson to add staff to promote career guidance, more information on long-term work benefits, right? Which we actually have, right? I can talk about Josh King, but like, what are
Yeah.
you focused on now when you're recruiting, and forget the money, like forget the compensation, like what is it about Davidson that we are selling to balance having kids come to Davidson and stay at Davidson?
Um, I'll speak more about the stay at Davidson, because the come to Davidson is because we have incredible history. We have incredible consistency. You look at our coaching staff, 5 of the 6 members of our staff are Davidson alums that played basketball here and loved our experience so much we want to be back. You have the success stories and the all conference players, the players of the year, the international players who have come through and had life-changing experiences to pave the way for that next international player. Brendan talked a little bit about the pipeline to professional ball from here. Um, so we don't have a problem convincing people to think that this could be a great place for them to come to Davidson for the beginning, at least, of their college experience. The recruiting our own players, that's what we're really having to adapt to. And I'll say this: we're so grateful for all of our supporters and donors. And you mentioned our assistant GMs, Stephen Curry and Matt Berman, the Berman family, who started this Curry Berman Fund, which has essentially been our revenue sharing. Until that point, we didn't have that side of the battle, the money side, the salary side, if you will, to recruit our players. So we really did our best to help our guys, and we didn't have as talented teams then. To be as successful as we wanted to, but we tried to give our guys, just make our guys every single day feel great about being in the gym and love their Davidson experience. That is still the greatest thing that we could do to recruit our players, is to give them an incredible experience. But what was interesting was once we did have some ability to share revenue with our players through the Curry Berman Fund, was it allowed myself and our coaching staff to really hold guys even more accountable. So I think we really helped players develop this past year in a different way than we were able to before we were able to provide them with any monetary benefits. But ultimately, to recruit them, and you have to help them believe in the vision that we have for them, to re-recruit them. We end our season and it's devastating, because you've worked so hard for so many months with a group to accomplish all the goals that we fall short on. We fall short on. But by the time you get off that plane, we played in the NIT. We got back from Stillwater, and I'm putting together notes for the meetings I'm going to be having for the days ahead, in which I'm sharing what the vision could be for each of our players who we are hoping to keep. A lot of that re-recruitment is already taking place, from our general manager from Austin Bunce, communicating with agents of our players. And what's really interesting is we had 13 scholarship players this year. 4 of them I'm sorry, 3 of those 14 were seniors that graduated. So you take the other 10. 9 of those 10 players all said that they love Davidson, they want to be back. But and then those conversations took place with Austin. The one other didn't play as much as he hoped, and that was going to be ultimately his reason for choosing to leave was playing time and role. But Austin has to do a lot of work to position us to be able to, with the plan of attack that I help our players put together and to believe in terms of how they can improve and why this is the perfect place for them to develop as players. And still, we always point out the value of the Davidson degree, and I think that was Rick Barnes' question, like what can we talk about from a career standpoint? We have a player here named Josh Scovins who is returning for his senior year. He was a great player for us last year in his first year at Davidson. I think he's going to have a superb senior year. Well, Josh has already had an alum that he had a chance to interact with over the last 11 months since he's been at Davidson that said he would love to hire Josh once he decides to stop playing basketball. So there's certainly that side of it. Our players interact a lot with our alums, and we really made an effort to do that last summer. Whether it was Andrew Lovedale coming to speak with our team, we went out to the Bay Area, which we plan to do again this summer, and our guys got to spend time with Steph Curry. We had a day in the fall where all local alums, but even some guys chose to make a little bit longer of a drive to come back and interact with our guys after a practice early in the year. Making that connection and understanding that having a vision of what guys who stayed at Davidson and graduated from Davidson, what they can go on to be and who they are. Ultimately, if you give these guys an incredible experience, they're going to want to be here. I think we do an incredible job to the best of our ability to help make that happen. But there's so much opportunity. And whether your goal is to, as one player said this offseason, my goal has always been to be able to play at the highest level. That may never trump that experience that we give them. And I'm going to actually put somebody here on the spot as I share this, as I screen share this. I use my good friend ChatGPT to project what Brendan Winter's statistics would, if he were to get a 5th year of eligibility, would look like. And Louisville, who we all know, or I think Tyler, you know better than anybody what kind of money they have. So I just threw Louisville in there. If Louisville wanted Brendan Winters, what would they be willing to pay him? That's a pretty impressive number, and that's the reality of what is available to players. And I don't know, and Brendan, you and I have this lifelong relationship as former teammates, roommates that we'll always have. But how can you look past opportunities like this, and how can you really question somebody who could have an opportunity like this? So I guess I'm not really putting Brendan on the spot, more just showcasing what a player like Brendan could have been capable of doing and achieving and benefiting from at the college level. But we'll do our best to make their Davidson experience as great as possible, and hope that's a 4-year experience.
Don't do it, Brendan. Don't go to Louisville. Kentucky will offer you more.
That would have been impossible to pass up. That's why I don't know how you all do it.
Brendan, you're saying like pass up. The way things are going right now, you could go play right now, right? If they're signing RJ Lewis, you got 5th year eligibility. Yeah. Just go play right now.
I'm going to start training again. Might need to do it.
Stefan's got 1 more year, right? Like when he's like, what's his break? So, Brendan, Matt, Tyler, I want to thank you all so much. I do want to turn it back over to Judith really quickly, just to say a quick note about the Q&A, but we'll try to rush through those answer those questions as quickly as possible. But Judith, you want to talk about the Q&A?
Yes. Hi. Sorry, I was technology challenges. Good evening or good afternoon again. Yes. Thanks. Chris, hopefully you're seeing there's quite a lot of questions in the Q&A. But that said, folks, if you have more questions, we absolutely want you to go ahead and add more. Please keep putting your questions in there. Chris, I think you've navigated some of them, but there's some I think that still are certainly ripe for folks to touch base on.
Yeah, we'll try to get through these, and then appreciate everybody's engagement. So Peter, I know Peter, he's a lacrosse parent. He's had MC just graduate, and Shannon's a rising junior. So our lacrosse team had an incredible year, won an A10 championship. They beat Richmond in the semifinals, and they're a full scholarship program. And we are not. And Davidson basketball, as we talked about, has tons of hurdles with high academic standards and competing against programs. How can we compete? And I'll take that one. I would say Peter, is that we are competing. So if you look at sort of where we were last year, we were picked to finish 11th. We finished 6th, won over 20 games, made it to the NIT. And that's historically always been our MO. What we've told folks and what I tell folks, especially from a fundraising perspective, is we are never going to do the more with most, but we want to do more with more, right? So paying basketball players is really sort of the cost of doing business now. You still have to win the games. We're never going to have Kentucky's budget, Tyler, but honestly, that's not our model. We're not built that way, right? The majority of our endowment goes towards our mission around giving people access and opportunity, right? And so for us, like it's that really unique balance of, hey, we're never going to compete, and we don't necessarily even want to compete with the most. We're just trying to move the needle so that we give ourselves an opportunity, and more often than not, we can compete at that level, right? And that's for all of our programs, right? Our women's lacrosse team went up against a full scholarship program in Clemson, and it was an eye opener for us. But if we're able to win a lacrosse championship with so few scholarships, we don't necessarily need to be fully funded. We just have to move the needle a little bit more, and we do that across all of our programs. And that's what basketball is showing right now that we can do. Right? We don't have the budgets that some of these other programs have, and it's okay. Now, will we take it? Absolutely. Is it realistic? Probably not. But we have to be competitive in the space, and we have to sort of stay in that space because we have a great environment, great academic environment, great coaches, great staff, great community, and we can compete. And that's what we're trying to do as we're moving and navigate through this space. The next question, and Tyler, I'll kick this to you. The annual payroll for Davidson, which I cannot share, compared to $22 million for Kentucky. Do all players receive a salary in the current environment? You spoke a little bit about it, but it is a mixture of revenue share directly from the institution and third party NIL. I will ask you though, how has this changed like your model from a media perspective, and like the question, like a lot of times it's like you're searching for different things and doing research, but like you guys had to shift your entire model, and the media has to shift the type of questions they ask, the type of information they're looking for, the publicly available information, right? That's available, how contracts are structured, are they building with incentives? Like it's shifted everything that you guys are doing and covering Kentucky basketball, but then sort of college athletics as a whole.
Yeah, it's gotten very complicated. I'm sure that Matt, you'll appreciate this, and Brendan, you deal with agents in your line too. You don't really know what number to believe anymore. Say, you hear Kentucky has an offer out to so and so for $3 million. Well, is that $3 million number, is that coming from the agent? Then it's probably more like 2 million, because they want that number to look bigger just to make it look like they're doing a better job. And obviously, yeah, the rev share money is pretty standardized, but the money that goes above that, the NIL money, it gets very complicated. And UK has a deal with JMI Sports, its multimedia rights partner. But through that, it's every deal they make, it has to be with a JMI Sports UK partner. And there are tons of those, but that language gets kind of complicated in these contracts, and you're bringing JMI to the recruiting table too. I think you guys are really smart that you have a front office set up already. Kentucky, for instance, has kind of been slow in that, and that's kind of burning them right now, especially in basketball. Having a front office in place with a general manager, you can get ahead of it. Coaches can just worry about coaching. They don't have to worry about talking to agents. They don't have to worry about negotiating. They don't have to worry about finding the next great international prospect. It's really interesting. And, just it feels like Davidson was very, very smart to latch on to the front office role, but also its brand with Steph Curry, because no matter Davidson will always be a mid-major, yes. But when you say Davidson, people will think Steph Curry. And that is such a huge, huge part of the brand. So for me, as a proud alum, but also in the media side, it's been really great to see Davidson embrace that. And I hope that connection continues to be strong. It's really cool to hear that the current team gets to go to the Bay and work out with Steph. And I think the more that connection stays strong, the better for Davidson.
Yeah, we're going to try to stay as close to Stefan as possible. My guy Rick had a couple questions talking about adding staff to promote career development. We kind of spoke to that, the Josh Scovins example. We have Josh King, who's an assistant AD, works in career development for the Matthews Center. He focuses just on career development just for athletes at Davidson. And so that's unique. There's not a lot of schools that have that model. And so again, rising tuition costs, the NIL, transfer portal. You have to figure out ways to add more value, and focusing on career development and providing those opportunities is definitely a way to do so. And Davidson does it very well. Your next question about the 5 and 5 years, 5 years to play five. Yes, we think it's going to pass. I don't know if the one transfer rule is going to pass. I think that ship has sailed. I hope it passes, meaning like you can transfer one time and be immediately eligible, versus where we are right now. You can transfer as many times as long as you are eligible. But I think the 5 and 5 will pass. I don't think the transfer rules are going backwards. So that's just what we're hearing. Jeff, you asked about the recruiting of European professional basketball players. I mean, you live in San Diego. San Diego State recently signed 3 professional basketball players. I mean, Matt, you can speak to that. We just signed a couple professional players as well, right? Like it's shifted, right? The ability to recruit kids that are playing professionally, maybe finished high school or didn't even go to high school, but play professionally now. Now we have the ability to recruit certain kids that are now 19, 20, 21 years old that you couldn't do so before.
Yeah, I can't exactly speak to how some of these 22, 23-year-old professionals are getting eligible and being able to find their way over here. We will continue to recruit internationally. We have signed a young player from Australia for next year. We have signed a player from Germany, who's actually coached by Martin Nides, one of our alums, the Davidson basketball alum class of 2002. And we have received a commitment from another player who is just completing his application. He committed last week. And we will continue to do that. NCAA has loosened their rules on what they consider to be professional. And I'm not going to speak as eloquently about it as maybe Chris could, or because I don't think anybody actually knows the rules, first of all. But they've loosened the rules around what is considered professional and what is considered eligible. They're pretty much, if you sign a pro contract in Europe, that does not ban you from being able to be an NCAA athlete. Now, if you do sign a professional contract in the NBA, you are no longer permitted to play college basketball. And I think it was Tyler who mentioned several players that Will Wade has recruited or have happened in the past year at Baylor and at Alabama, which they did sign NBA contracts, but they never played in the NBA. That'll never be a path for Davidson. It's a little too messy. We like it to be fairly clean, and that's necessary at a place with the standards we have academically and what it takes to be admitted here, and really what's going to fit well with our community and our program. But we have a very good sophomore returning from Spain. I mentioned him earlier, Ian Plateo, and he was a junior player on a pro club. So he could play for the first division team, which is one of the best in all of Spain, which is often considered the best league in Europe. So he's got some of these guys have great experience, but they're playing on a youth team while having access to the senior team. For example, Ian Plateo, who is 18 years old, he played in a game. He played like 30 seconds in the game, but he played in the game against Tyler Kalinowski 2 years ago. Tyler Kalinowski was the 2015 Atlantic 10 Player of the Year, who graduated from Davidson, our first year in the Atlantic 10. So we still have all these small circles where our former players have connections to our future players, and it's part of what makes us special.
Great. Erica asked, appreciate about hearing some of the developmentally appropriate and human conversations with student athletes. How can we shift our support of student athletes? I do think, again, just focusing on the value of Davidson. And one thing that's great about Davidson, and we haven't talked about it just yet, especially with international players, the host family. I mean, Rick was asking questions. He's been a host parent forever. The host family program that we have, not just for athletes, but for all students at Davidson, but just providing support for them. And then again, focusing on what Davidson can ultimately provide value in, right? Within the academic space, within the career development space, and setting folks up for long-term success. But just meeting them where they are, we have way more resources. I mean, somebody asked, hey, you're focusing on basketball. What about, where's the gap with everybody else? But we've invested in facilities through our new Davidson College Stadium, Game Changers Fieldhouse, our weight room, health and wellness, mental health. Like, we've invested in so much across the student experience to enhance everything that we do. So that will continue kind of as we live in this space. The non-revenue sports, I can speak to this as well. basketball is the focus for revenue sharing. Our other coaches are really are not as impacted, right? And Tyler, I don't know if you can speak to Kentucky beyond football and basketball, but in some instances, right, there's revenue sharing in NIL, but our coaches are sort of continuing this vein to recruit incredible students, student athletes. And we're trying to increase our scholarship levels, right? Like that's an opportunity for us, especially as other programs are winding scholarships down and winding program support down. We're trying to ramp scholarship support up, especially across all of our Olympic sports, because we think there's an opportunity, right? And as we've talked about with the lacrosse model, it does like our margin of error is pretty slim. Like we're not that far away, even if we're not the fully funded program. And so our other programs, there's less chaotic in those other programs outside of basketball, and so our coaches are continuing to recruit high academic kids as we are across the board, and we retain more than most, right? And the focus is providing more choice through scholarships. I don't know if you can speak to Kentucky non-football basketball, Tyler.
Yeah, so Kentucky does revenue sharing with 6 sports: men's basketball, women's basketball, football, baseball, volleyball, and softball. And so volleyball is getting super popular. So I think you'll see, even at schools where they don't get rev share, there's a lot of NIL support. I think the same could be said about sports like gymnastics. Gymnastics is so popular. That's a very obviously an Olympic sport. It was interesting. Arkansas tried to get rid of its men's and women's tennis programs. I don't know if you saw that. And there was such backlash that they decided to bring them back. So I think it's interesting. You know, everybody talks about non-revenue sports potentially going away because they don't have the financial support. Well, they do still matter to a lot of people, to the point that a big school like Arkansas is bringing men's and women's tennis back. So it's interesting. But yeah, you do have to have, for those the sports that are not getting the rev share, some kind of structure in place, whether it's donor support or of the like.
Yeah, absolutely. And they brought them back, the tennis programs, but through donor support,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So the school's no longer supporting the scholarships. Now they're sort of privately funded through. So that's the model that a lot of institutions are taking, the bigger institutions. Brendan, I'll kick it to you. David asked, like, I hate to raise this, but in light of the current situation, are D3 athletes more likely to be student athletes, right? Like you talked about shifting your model for pro skills to more focus on those D3, the ones that are using basketball to get an education, right? And what does that look like for you all in terms of pro skills?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for the most part, yes, definitely. Division 3 athletes are more like student athletes, although at Davidson with the, rigid academic standards, I put them right there. So it's so challenging, and I often think about what a challenge Matt and Chris and everyone at Davidson has with the academic standards combined with the super competitive kind of crazy world it is today. But yeah, at the Division 3 level, it certainly is academics first, athletics second, which is not the way it is at Division 1.
Yeah, it's and what again, the unique thing about us, as you said, is we are effectively academically a Division 3 school, right? We're a top liberal arts institution, top 10 in the country, or top 15 in the country with Division 1 athletics. We're the highest ranked institution in the country, liberal arts wise, with Division 1 athletics, right? And so that there's nobody doing what we're doing at our level. It's hard for sure, but it is a unique situation. Um, Steve, you asked about inevitability about Power Four schools walking away. We kind of spoke a little bit about that. We're not sure. Jim, you asked the same thing. Like, is football, basketball going to break off? Will there be a Division 1 double A, promotion, relegation? Crystal ball, I'm not sure. I just know that at some point something has to break, right? Like there needs to be sort of a break off. And Tyler, they're going to move to probably a 2014 playoff here pretty soon, which is going to throw more money into the marketplace, right? But at some point, there's going to need to be a delineation, either employee status, collective bargaining, either a branch off, special status for revenue generating scholar athletes. Like at some point, there's going to need to be some sort of delineation between sort of, hey, these are generating revenue, these are not. Um, and sort of what that looks like, we're not necessarily sure.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important to see what this next bipartisan bill is like, because I think everyone is just, once the federal guidelines, come through and we get some federal legislation put in place, maybe things will get better. So I think that that's what people are waiting to see. But like I said, there's been a lot of talk that the SEC and the Big Ten may just go do their own thing, and that would be really interesting to see if that happens.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just a couple more. I know we're overtime. Jeff Brown, what role does education play in college sports? I think Davidson is trying to answer that pretty consistently, right? Like we tell people you don't have to compromise. There are schools that compete at the highest level academically, but sacrifice athletically, like some of those Division III schools. And then there are schools that compete at the highest level athletically and sacrifice academically. I'm not calling out Kentucky, Tyler. I'm just saying those schools exist. And Davidson doesn't compromise, right? We do not compromise academics for athletics or vice versa. So for us, they go hand in hand. Um, Mark asked, are there still scholarship limits in an NIL environment? Yes, those limits have increased, right? So that's part of what came about through the House settlement is the scholarship limits have increased drastically. You can now have, as the question was asked about earlier for lacrosse, you can have 38 lacrosse scholarships now, equal to the roster limit. And some schools may be in that space where they pay NIL versus scholarships, but in some instances it's all the same. And so it depends on what schools choose and the direction that they choose to go in. So, and then one more here. Sorry, we won't get to it all. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Um, what support I'll answer this. What support is the athletic department getting from the current administration? I will say, President Hicks has been tremendous, honestly. He's one of our biggest fans. He believes in our model. He believes in the balance of athletics and academics. And he is doing a ton, whether it's directly supporting women's sports and women's scholarships, but has embraced kind of this new age and said like, hey, we're going to do it. We're going to do it our way. And so the institution has provided resources and continues to provide creative ways for us to navigate this space. And so, again, it's something we're proud of. Athletics is unique at Davidson, and it's a hallmark of the uniqueness of Davidson, the distinctiveness of Davidson, and it also speaks to how this place can kind of put people in different ways, right? Like you have a Matt that is now the head coach at his alma mater. You have a Brendan that has created one of the most successful grassroots youth basketball programs in the country. It was globally for a little bit, but you guys have kind of stayed on the United States now. And Tyler has carved out an incredible career in the media space and covering one of the biggest public institutions and one of the biggest sports fan bases in the country. And so that is Davidson, right? Like the liberal arts space, we don't teach people what to think. We teach people how to think. We prepare them for lives of leadership and service. And we also embrace the chaotic challenge that's in front of us around maintaining everything that we do and what's so special about this place, but not shying away from the challenge in front of us. So, Brendan, Tyler, Matt, want to thank you all again. Hope folks got a lot out of it. Judith, I'll turn it over to you to close. And looking forward. Hopefully, folks will sign up for a reunion if it's your reunion weekend. But honored to have spent the time with you all today. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate all of you taking time this afternoon to lead us in this really informative and eye-opening discussion. No doubt if we had this conversation a week later, who knows what would have changed by then with the constantly changing environment. Really, really appreciate that. A follow-up email will be sent to everyone who was on today's call. And so look for that in the next day or so. It'll include a short survey and some other contact information and tidbits that'll be helpful. Do know that today's event was recorded, and that will also be information about that will also be included in that email. It'll be online on the Davidson College Back to School class website probably by early next week for anyone interested. And you're certainly welcome to share that link with anyone who was not able to join us today so they can also take advantage of hearing all the amazing information that was shared. Really, again, appreciate everyone for dialing in. Appreciate our panelists for sharing this fantastic information. As Chris said, we hope we'll see many folks if you are reunioning back in just a few short weeks on Davidson's campus for reunion. And we wish everyone a great afternoon. Thanks.